Every professional journey, especially when that ambition really starts to bubble up, it hits this core tension point.
Hmm.
You want to move up, you want more influence. And the immediate just gut reflex for most of us is to lean hard into networking.
Oh, absolutely. More meetings, more coffees.
Exactly. You spend just countless hours chasing connections. You're optimizing your LinkedIn profile for, maximum visibility. You start treating proximity and access like they're the main levers for your career.
And that reflex, I mean, it's entirely understandable, right? Because relationships offer this really warm, immediate feedback. You go have a coffee, you feel instantly productive.
Yeah, you feel like you've done something.
Exactly. But when we took the stack of sources for this deep dive, and we're talking about the research, the case studies, these deep historical analyses of some truly transformative careers, they painted a much more counterintuitive picture, and frankly, a much harder one.
So our mission today is really to analyze this argument
Yeah.
that, it just flicks the whole balance. The idea is that networking is a powerful amplifier for skill that's already there,
Yeah.
but it is a disastrous, completely non-functioning substitute for it.
That's the core.
We're looking at these careers where people shifted their professional standing not from being just known, which is, it's fleeting, but from becoming absolutely needed, which, as we're about to see, is kind of like becoming infrastructure.
We have 5 really extraordinary high-stakes case studies. They span finance, deep tech, operational leadership, even aerospace, and they're all structured around a single question.
Okay.
How did the ability to consistently deliver verifiable value, what we're going to call earned power, how did that generate opportunities that borrowed power, relationships alone, could never have possibly matched?
So earned power versus borrowed power.
That's it. And we're structuring the whole discussion around this core principle of utility. And we're starting with maybe the biggest, loudest example. It's the idea that if you want a seat at the table, well, sometimes you don't ask for an invitation. You build an instrument that forces the existing power structure to depend on you.
Okay, so let's start in New York City. It's 1981, the world of high finance. And we have Michael Bloomberg. He's 39 years old, a general partner at Salomon Brothers.
Right, a very powerful firm.
A powerhouse. But Salomon Brothers was going through this huge corporate shift, and in what is really a textbook example of a career getting derailed, Bloomberg was pushed out.
It's that classic corporate hinge moment. And what's so important about this is what he didn't walk away with. He wasn't, looking to monetize a Rolodex full of favors.
It wasn't calling in chits.
No. He secured a $10 million partnership buyout. Now, that's significant money in 1981. I mean, absolutely. But that cash was going to be fuel for the next move, not some comfortable cushion for retirement.
And this is where the typical story about Bloomberg, the powerful figure, just completely skips over the most essential point. The ignored truth about his time at Salomon is that he wasn't just another suit.
No, not at all.
He had been forced, and apparently somewhat reluctantly, into heading the IT development and computer systems side of the business.
Which was not the glamorous job.
Not at all. He was deeply entangled in the plumbing of Wall Street. The operational machinery, not the fancy cocktail circuit where all the big deals were announced.
And that gave him a unique perspective. He saw something that, very few others did, or at least very few others really focused on. He saw that Wall Street money wasn't really made by having marginally better information.
What do you mean by that? Everyone assumes it's about getting the tip first.
Well, yeah, but at the top, everyone eventually got the same teletypes, the same news wires. The real leverage point wasn't access to the info. It was the speed and the quality of the decision you made based on that information.
Okay, so it's about processing it better.
Exactly. The average trader at that time was literally drowning in paper and manual calculations. They were constantly running to the back office, waiting on a printout. Bloomberg realized that this lack of technical infrastructure was the bottleneck on everything, on efficiency, on risk management, and ultimately on profit.
So he didn't go start a competing investment bank. That would have been the typical networking play, right? To go raise money from old contacts?
That's the expected move. But no, he didn't do that. He didn't chase his old contacts for fundraising for some conventional venture. He launched a company called Innovative Market Systems, or IMS, in 1981, and he committed the bulk of that $10 million buyout to it.
Wow. So he put his own money on the line.
A huge chunk of it. The radical bet was on utility. His product idea was, on the surface, simple, but technically it was incredibly challenging. He believed Wall Street professionals would pay a premium, a high recurring subscription for real-time market data, specialized analytics, and messaging, all delivered through a dedicated proprietary terminal.
A terminal. So a physical box on your desk.
a physical box. And this terminal was designed to reduce the friction, the time between a piece of information appearing on a wire and a trader actually executing a decision based on that information.
The sources mentioned the early name for it was Market Master, which, I mean, it sounds almost aggressively unsexy.
It had to be. It wasn't being sold as a luxury item. This was a necessary piece of machinery. The whole focus was on being utilitarian, designed to reduce uncertainty at the absolute point of decision right there on the trader's desk.
Which meant what exactly? What did that require?
It required proprietary hardware, which is expensive. It required reliable, dedicated lines, also expensive, and incredibly complex software to aggregate all these diverse data streams that previously required, like, 5 different feeds and a ton of manual reconciliation.
Okay, so this is the critical distinction from networking. People assumed his connections to Salomon got the ball rolling. But the sources really highlight that the turning point wasn't some invitation to a networking lunch. It was his ability to deliver an installation, to physically place a tool that worked into a massive institution.
Let's really drill down into the mechanism of that first big success. So by late 1982, the first 20 Market Master units go into service at Merrill Lynch.
Okay.
And Merrill Lynch doesn't just, buy them with the standard purchase order. They execute a deal that fundamentally validates Bloomberg's entire enterprise.
So was the deal.
Merrill Lynch took a 30% stake in his company for $30 million.
Wait, $30 million for a 30% stake? That's 3 times the capital Bloomberg even started with.
Exactly. And on top of that, they imposed an exclusivity restriction on sales to some of their primary competitors for a period of time.
Wow. Okay, I need to pause on that. That is not a vendor-client relationship. That's a strategic, almost existential investment. Merrill Lynch, a titan of finance, is basically validating this tiny startup with a $30 million check.
Precisely. And you have to ask, why would they do that? They weren't investing in Bloomberg's charm or his relationship history. They were investing in the measured, demonstrable difference that the terminal made to their trading floor, to their profitability, to their risk reduction.
So it was a cold, hard calculation.
Completely. The terminal reduced the time delay for analytical reports from hours, sometimes even days, down to seconds. That kind of competitive edge is worth a massive, massive premium. The relationship and all that capital, it followed the utility. It didn't create it.
And that leads us directly to this concept you mentioned, instrument advantage. I've always been a little skeptical when people just say, oh, just build something great because, most of us don't have $10 million or the ability to build a proprietary terminal. How do we translate this concept to, the typical professional?
That's a crucial challenge to the whole thesis, but the principle absolutely scales. Instrument advantage isn't defined by the size of your company or the complexity of the hardware. It's defined by your output's ability to create dependence.
Dependence.
Networking gets you attention, you get a meeting on Tuesday, but skills, when they're manifested in a tool or a highly standardized system, they get you dependence. Once that system is integral to the workflow, whether it's a physical terminal or, a diagnostic report you create that consistently cuts reconciliation time in half, it stops being a luxury. It becomes infrastructure.
So if I'm a manager in, say, healthcare operations, my instrument isn't a terminal, but it could be a proprietary dashboard that I build, something that aggregates wait times, staff scheduling, supply levels, in a way that no existing software does.
Yes.
And it makes the decision-making for every single nurse supervisor measurably better.
Precisely. That is the difference between what we call networking advantage, which is borrowed power. It's reliant on someone else's social capital, and instrument advantage, which is earned power.
Earned power.
Earned power relies on your consistent, reliable ability to deliver value. The moment you become infrastructure, you are necessary. And the nature of all your relationships, it changes entirely. You stop chasing access, access starts chasing you.
It also means your improvements compound over time. I mean, every little efficiency Bloomberg added to that terminal just made the next version even stickier, more defensible.
And this gives us the key takeaway tactic from this whole story. Don't aim to build something that's just impressive. Aim to build a decision tool. It has to wedge itself into a critical workflow.
Edge into the workflow.
And before you even think about pitching it, you have to prove the delta. Measure the before and after. This report used to take 4 hours to compile. Now my tool does it in 40 seconds. That measurable difference. That is the core of instrument advantage.
That is a powerful shift in focus. The brutal efficiency of this segment's core lesson then is, if you want better connections, build something people can't stop using. Okay, let's move from finance to the hyper-competitive world of deep technology. This is a place where the currency of credibility is earned through visible, verifiable execution. Our second case study focuses on Lisa Su and the incredible turnaround of Advanced Micro Devices, AMD.
When Lisa Su stepped into the CEO role on October 8, 2014, AMD was, to put it bluntly, a corporate disaster zone. The company was just struggling under the weight of investor doubt, a mountain of technical debt, and just fierce customer hesitation.
And their market capitalization was what, around $2 billion?
Hovering right around $2 billion, yeah.
Yeah.
Which was a massive, massive competitive gap compared to their rivals.
It really felt like a company that was constantly apologizing for its last product launch. And the standard playbook for this level of corporate distress is, hire a branding agency, go on a huge investor roadshow, and spend the next 2 years just managing perception.
The narrative approach.
Exactly.
But Sue, who holds a PhD in electrical engineering from MIT, she approached this problem with the discipline of a scientist. She recognized that in the semiconductor industry, credibility isn't earned through speeches or slick marketing campaigns. It's paid for in shipped silicon.
Shipped silicon.
Yeah.
What does that mean in practice?
It means you have to physically prove that you can design and manufacture a product that performs exactly as you promised, that it's reliable, and you can do it at scale. It has to exist. It has to work.
So what was the instruction she gave to her team? I mean, day one, what's the message?
The sources all emphasize her mandate was just brutally simple. Stop defending the company's past. Stop narrating some theoretical future vision. Just deliver. Show the world what we can do.
So the focus pivoted entirely away from investor relations and perception management.
And on to disciplined, massive technical execution.
But this wasn't some soft target. They didn't just decide to make, better laptop stickers or something. The core strategy was defined as making AMD a high-performance computing leader.
Which was an audacious goal.
Incredibly, they specifically targeted the server market where they had, less than 1% market share. You can't just network your way into displacing competitors in the data center.
You absolutely cannot. That kind of leap required two things. First, huge technical bets, a complete redesign of their core processor architecture, and second, just unrelenting schedule discipline. They had to rebuild the belief internally that they could actually hit their deadlines repeatedly and that the product would meet or ideally exceed the benchmarks.
Okay, so let's talk about the technical payoff of that bet. The centerpiece of this whole transformation was the Zen architecture, which finally arrived in 2017 with the first Ryzen processors. Why was this such a massive shift?
Okay, so this is where the skill becomes legible to everyone. Prior AMD architectures, they suffered from really poor instructions per cycle, or IPC, performance, meaning they wasted too much time and energy processing basic tasks. That led to power inefficiency, low clock speeds, a lot of heat, just not competitive. Zen was a complete ground-up redesign, obsessed with maximizing IPC.
So it was a fundamental re-engineering.
Totally. And when Ryzen launched, it didn't just compete with the established market leader. In many specific workloads, it actually exceeded their performance for the first time in years. This wasn't marketing hype. These were verifiable benchmark results that anyone could run. This was the historic shift that the sources all point to.
And the market responded immediately because the proof was, auditable. Anyone could check the numbers.
Look at the scoreboard change. I mean, it is the undeniable result of that execution. AMD's market cap soared from around $2 billion in 2014 to nearly $300 billion in the years that followed.
150 times.
A nearly 150-fold increase. That kind of value creation is a delivery win. It wasn't about Sue meeting the right people at Davos. It was pure, visible execution that forced every customer, every investor, and every competitor to completely recalculate AMD's value proposition.
This really grounds the idea that credibility is just less social and much more evidentiary, at least in these high-performance fields.
And that's the proof loop in action. It's a closed system. You make a focused technical bet. You ship the verifiable outcome on schedule. The market updates its belief in your capacity to deliver. That updated belief generates better opportunities, higher margins, and then you reinvest those gains into the next big shipment. It's a virtuous cycle.
So that default professional habit of chasing the perception of competence, looking busy, using the right buzzwords, attending all the prestigious events, it's just a constant treadmill if you can't actually deliver.
And it's exhausting. I mean, if you can't reliably ship verifiable outcomes, you spend all your political and emotional capital just explaining, persuading, justifying the gaps. Sue's mandate is the antidote. Don't negotiate your reputation. Publish it in the form of tangible outcomes.
Networking creates a possibility.
Right, a possibility of a meeting.
Yeah.
But skillful execution, that creates the inevitability of success.
But the challenge for the listener remains, right? How do we as individual professionals adopt that proof loop when we don't have, $5 billion R&D budgets?
The scaling factor here is the proof cycle. You have to shorten the proof cycle. Instead of trying to ship one massive, perfect project every year, you break your goals into shippable, legible increments.
Like what?
A new piece of process documentation, a finalized budget, a working dashboard, a pilot program, something tangible every 2 to 6 weeks. You make your work inspectable. The goal is to let potential allies and clients evaluate your work without even knowing you personally.
And if you have that proof in hand, the whole dynamic of networking just shifts, doesn't it?
It fundamentally changes. You network after you have an artifact. The conversation pivots from, could you please give me a chance, to, hey, we noticed your work on X. How can we get you to apply that here?
The actionable takeaway from this segment, the brutal truth of execution, seems pretty clear. Stop asking to be taken seriously. Ship something serious. Okay, so our third story takes us right into the core of corporate innovation and politics, and how building a physical artifact can sometimes be the only way to win an internal battle. We're in Tokyo, late 1980s, at the Sony Corporation with an engineer named Ken Kutaragi.
Sony at that time was a company really defined by its excellence in high-end consumer electronics. We're talking the Walkman, high-end audio and video gear. They chased respectability.
A premium brand.
A premium brand. And in that context, video games were absolutely not a strategic priority. They were seen as toys, low margin, and certainly below the company's corporate dignity.
Yet Kutaragi, who was a mid-level engineer, he saw the potential. The sources note that he saw his young daughter playing the Nintendo Famicom and just realized this interactive entertainment category was absolutely exploding. And when he discovered that Nintendo was looking for a custom sound chip for their next console, he didn't, write a memo to his executive committee asking for permission to bid on the project.
No, he did the opposite. He took the work and he built it in secret.
In secret.
This is the essential tactical choice he made. He knew about the permission-first trap. In massive, established organizations, genuinely new, disruptive ideas that challenge the company's identity, they usually get killed in committee.
They die in the PowerPoint phase.
Exactly. They die during the presentation because they don't have an established political constituency yet. Kutaragi understood he couldn't win the political argument. He had to produce an artifact, a functioning, complex piece of silicon that would make the argument completely unnecessary.
So he was working on core Sony technology, committing Sony resources, and essentially doing this deep, unauthorized work with what was technically a competitor.
Precisely. And when the Sony executives eventually discovered this highly irregular collaboration, the backlash was, it was furious. Accounts describe it as a full-blown corporate crisis. He was seen as betraying the company's established high-end focus.
And he was only saved, incredibly, by the decisive support of the Sony president, Norio Oga.
Yes.
So why? Why did Oga protect him? Was it a personal connection, or was it the skill?
It was the leverage of the artifact itself, combined with the power of the partner. Kutaragi hadn't just built a concept, he had built a working sound chip. It was a high-value piece of intellectual property that cemented this quiet, technical relationship between Sony and the absolute dominant player in the gaming market, Nintendo.
So his skill produced a deliverable that was just too valuable to scrap.
Exactly. And the corporate politics had to bend around that reality.
So that sets the stage for the next dramatic turn.
Yeah.
The relationship deepens. It leads to this joint CD-ROM add-on project for Nintendo, this hybrid machine that they dubbed the PlayStation. And then we get to the infamous betrayal in 1991.
It was a shocking public humiliation. Sony unveils the PlayStation prototype collaboration at a big trade show, only for Nintendo to announce just hours later that they were abandoning Sony entirely and partnering with Philips instead.
Wow. A calculated, devastating public snub.
It was.
So the easy career move here is reputation management.
Yeah.
You retreat, you apologize, you try to mend fences with these powerful entities. But Kutaragi chose a much harder path.
He fundamentally reframed the entire event. Instead of viewing it as a political failure, he saw it as a liberation. He argued that without that snub, the PlayStation would never have seen the light of day as a standalone console. He decided to leverage all the technical work that was already completed to build the replacement Sony's very own gaming console.
What's so fascinating about this is that he wasn't networking to save his job or his reputation. He was building a competitive product.
And that's the core principle right there. Networking is how ideas travel, but skills are how ideas survive contact with reality. Kutaragi created a survival mechanism through building. When you only have a pitch, you need the right network just to keep it alive. But when you have a working prototype, allies start to recruit themselves because the work is inspectable and its potential is just evident.
Okay, but I have to challenge this a little because prototype before permission, especially when it's done in secret, that can sound highly risky, maybe even unethical in a modern corporate structure. I mean, are we endorsing breaking internal protocol here?
That's a necessary point of friction, and it's a fair question. The sources don't endorse ethical misconduct, but they do highlight that the ethical use of stealth time is often necessary to protect genuinely disruptive ideas.
So what's the line?
Kutaragi wasn't pocketing funds or committing fraud. He was doing deep, technical, unauthorized development. The lesson isn't to be sneaky. The lesson is that the artifact must precede the political discussion. If you spend all your time pitching a vague concept, that concept is totally dependent on the mood of the room that day. But if you arrive with a demonstrable proof of concept, a prototype, the conversation shifts from, should we do this, to, how do we scale this working thing?
The prototype changes the power dynamic.
Yeah.
You go from being a supplicant asking for funding to a creator who is providing leverage.
Exactly. When you have the prototype, you recruit allies with gravity, the kind of people who are impressed by execution, not just rhetoric. Your skills make networking stop feeling like begging. Your work becomes your resume, and the prototype is the ultimate proof of that work.
So the tactical application here is to focus on building the smallest possible proof that changes the entire conversation. And once you have it, the ultimate strategy is simple. Demo, don't debate.
The truth is that clear execution just beats political maneuvering almost every time in the long run. The strategic lesson from Kutaragi is this. Stop networking for permission prototype your way into inevitability.
Okay, so we've talked about building instruments, we've talked about execution, prototyping. Now we're going to shift the focus entirely to a skill that is non-technical, but arguably one of the most critical for advancement within a complex organization. We're talking about the sheer value of clear thinking in public. And for this, we're discussing Ursula Burns at Xerox.
This is a story that proves the skills that compound aren't always tangible, like code or silicon. They can be behavioral. So in 1990, Burns had access. She was the executive assistant to the Xerox CEO, Paul Allaire.
Which is a position that puts you in the room.
It puts you in the room, absolutely, but it doesn't guarantee you any influence. She also had deep technical competence, though. She had risen up through mechanical engineering and manufacturing leadership.
And the moment that really defines this thesis for her wasn't a product redesign or some big launch. It was a high-level meeting about a mundane but incredibly complex subject, changing an employee benefits policy.
And the sources describe the atmosphere as being thick with corporate fog.
Corporate fog. I think we all know what that feels like.
Oh, yeah. It's that combination of jargon, vague nouns, passive language, and just this general mood of assent that prevents any real clarity. Everyone in the room is highly intelligent, but they're all just nodding along because interrupting the flow and admitting confusion carries this high social cost.
Right. It suggests you aren't smart enough or you're not in the loop.
Exactly. And Burns, sitting in a position that was supposed to be supportive, just taking notes, she did the thing that takes immense courage. She raised her hand.
And she delivered a sentence that became legendary. I don't get it, but from what I could get, I don't like it.
That sentence is just a masterful combination of humility and conviction. Let's break down its structure for a second. First, the humility. I don't get it. She explicitly admits a gap in understanding the precise mechanism being proposed. That immediately reduces the defensiveness of the presenters. But then, right away, she follows with the conviction. But from what I could get, I don't like it.
She's clarifying that while she may not know the mechanism, she can already assess the proposed impact. And that impact seems negative.
She decoupled the understanding of the technical details from the judgment of the practical outcome. That's an operator's way of thinking. That's someone who's worked on a factory floor.
It is. And the immediate, powerful effect was that the executives didn't punish her. They didn't get angry. They paused. They adjusted their language.
Wow.
They realized that if the CEO's own executive assistant couldn't cut through the jargon, there was absolutely no way the general employee population would ever understand or accept the policy.
So that moment taught Burns a fundamental truth. Asking the clarifying question isn't a weakness. It is a critical skill that rapidly separates the indispensable people from the interchangeable ones.
So she internalized that lesson. She realized she had this repeatable advantage. In large, complex organizations, the person who can reliably translate operational confusion into plain, actionable meaning, they become valuable faster than anyone else.
And her background is such key context here. I mean, having worked her way up through manufacturing and product development areas where a mistake in communication or a lack of clarity results in a tangible physical failure, she instinctively valued precision.
Right. A miscommunication in manufacturing means the part doesn't fit.
Exactly. That path rewards execution over social sparkle. She didn't rely on networking to earn respect in that room. She earned it by identifying complexity and forcing the underlying work into a reality-based discussion.
This really shifts our definition of what a valuable skill is. It's not just technical expertise, but it's the ability to think clearly in public. Plenty of people get access to the room, but most of them are just paralyzed by the social pressure to appear competent. Burns became the person who was trusted to cut through all that noise, even if it meant slowing the meeting down for a minute.
The default habit in corporate life is social safety. You avoid asking the basic question, you don't interrupt the consensus, and you are never the person who slows down the momentum. But the sources reveal that that social safety is incredibly expensive.
How so?
When confusion is left unnamed, bad decisions get made. Resources get wasted. Teams align around flawed assumptions simply because those assumptions were never clearly articulated in the first place.
And that's where the value of clarity is created. Burns surfaced the ambiguity and forced the conversation to the most relevant point. What is the impact? And is the organization actually willing to pay that cost?
That's the ultimate principle here. If you want opportunity, become the person who reduces confusion, because the person who reduces confusion simultaneously reduces risk. And leaders, regardless of the industry, finance, tech, operations, they will always pay an absolute premium for risk reduction.
So how do we turn this kind of courage into a repeatable tactic without, being perceived as the person who's always obstructionist?
You use what we can call the plain English interruption. Instead of asking a vague question, you name precisely what you don't know. And you use translating language to show the impact.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of saying, I'm confused about the synergy, you say, help me translate this jargon into impact. If we adopt this cost optimization strategy, the trade-off seems to be lower cost but higher employee friction in the service department. Are we consciously choosing that specific trade-off right now?
You translate the jargon into a specific defensible decision.
That reframes networking entirely. It's not about finding the right ear to pitch your idea to. It's about making sure that ear hears the verifiable truth of a situation.
And that's the core lesson here. Networking gets you in the room skill is what makes the room listen.
We now turn to the ultimate high-stakes scenario, where the need for absolute certainty just completely eclipsed the promise of new technology and the convenience of automation. This is NASA, 1962, preparing for John Glenton's orbital mission, Mercury Atlas 6. The stakes could not have been higher. This was the absolute peak of the space race. The entire mission depended on incredibly complex orbital mechanics, trajectory calculations, and precise re-entry coordinates.
And a single trajectory mistake was fatal.
Fatal, not just for the astronaut, but potentially for the entire American space program's credibility on the world stage.
So, the technology of the future had arrived. It came in the form of these massive, room-sized IBM computers. These machines were calculating the numbers faster than any human being could have ever dreamed of. But the core problem was trust.
Trust is a human construct, right? And it doesn't move at the speed of new technology, it moves at the speed of demonstrated reliability. The IBM machines, specifically the IBM 7090 mainframe, they were triumphs of engineering, but they were still new. They were prone to operational failures, they were difficult to debug.
And how did they work?
You fed them complex algorithms using punch cards, and the output was often opaque. The source material shows that the engineers themselves were still learning to trust the machine's output, especially given the history of failed test launches before this.
And John Glenn, the astronaut who's about to risk his life on this, was acutely aware of this lack of trust in the machine. He had access to all the top computer scientists, all the mission control data, all the high-level personnel. So what did he do?
He bypassed the entire hierarchy, and he made one of the most famous requests in the history of aerospace. He asked the engineers to get the girl, Katherine Johnson, to run the same complex equations by hand with a mechanical calculating machine and paper.
That language, as, jarring as it is for the era, it perfectly highlights our thesis. He didn't ask for the person with the most impressive title or the one who had successfully networked their way onto the mission control team. He asked for the person whose work, over years, had earned a specific, profound, and verifiable kind of competence.
Johnson was a mathematician in the West Area Computing Unit. She had already established her reputation as someone who was not only brilliant, but whose work was just flawless. Her skill wasn't just in computation, it was in verification.
Right.
She had to verify launch windows, trajectories, and re-entry coordinates. These are the numbers that dictated whether John Glenn burned up in the atmosphere or landed safely in the ocean. This was precise, high-stakes labor.
And what was the hinge moment that proved the value of skill over proximity to power?
It was singular and completely undeniable. The numbers matched. Johnson's painstaking, hand-calculated results confirmed the output of the massive IBM mainframe. That confirmation, that mathematical certainty, was the final operational green light.
And the sources are explicit about the outcome of this, they say. Only then did Glenn feel ready to fly. The critical go-no-go decision was based on mathematical certainty, verified by human competence, not on social approval or the cost of the machine or the assurances of the engineers.
This just makes the argument for skill undeniable. In the moment that mattered most, charisma and proximity were absolutely meaningless. Competence was the only currency that was accepted. Johnson's leverage was her verifiable competence. Glenn asked for her specifically because her reliability carried the necessary weight for that ultimate decision.
It just fundamentally flips the conventional idea of professional leverage, doesn't it? Networking gets you proximity, you get noticed. But skill is about becoming necessary. It gets you relied on.
And when you are relied on to reduce life or death risk, the dynamic changes entirely. Networking stops being a hunt for opportunity and it starts feeling more like gravity. People pull you into the room because the work needs you there to ensure safety and success. Her skill created this deep layer of trust that no amount of socializing could have ever generated.
So the tactical takeaway for the everyday professional, for you listening, is to actively try to become the last check person.
Yeah, exactly. And this means more than just doing good work. It means establishing a predictable, auditable verification ritual for your own output. Practice explaining, with granular detail, what would make your deliverable safe to trust, and what specific variables would cause it to break. This verifiable reliability is what compounds into real trust.
The ultimate truth from this high-stakes scenario is that in the moments that matter most, the world doesn't reward who you know. It rewards who can prove they're right. Okay, so we've navigated through the instrument advantage with Bloomberg, credibility by shipment with Sue, prototype before permission with Kutaragi, the value of clarity with Burns, and that ultimate verification with Katherine Johnson. Every single one of these cases points to the same core strategy, making skill visible, inspectable, and auditable. So now we're going to look at the philosophy that really underpins all of them, which is the necessity of proof.
For this, we turn to a quiet but pivotal moment in Helsinki, Finland, in 1991. Linus Torvalds, a 21-year-old computer science student, was working on his new PC. He wasn't aiming for a startup or anything. He was just frustrated with the limitations of the existing operating system at the time, which was MI-NIX.
He started with a pretty simple project, right? Just writing a terminal emulator to better interface with the hardware.
Yeah, but one tool led to another, and soon he was building the kernel, the very core layer of an operating system. This wasn't a paper pitch or some vanity project. This was hard, central, technically demanding work.
And the hinge moment for him wasn't a meeting with venture capitalists. It was a post he made on the Usenet news group, comp.os.minix, on August 25th, 1991.
And he was famously disarming about it. He called his project a free operating system and said it was just a hobby. But the critical component wasn't the modesty. It was the signal of momentum and technical capability. He mentioned he'd already ported essential difficult tools like Bash and GCC.
By mentioning those porting achievements, he was signaling that this project was real, it was executable, and it was already deeply complex. He didn't ask for introductions or favors from anyone. He asked for critique on his work.
And within weeks, he released Linux 0.01. It was imperfect. It was pre-alpha. He said it was meant mostly for reading, but it was a working kernel. It was real proof. This is the philosophy of proof in action. He wasn't trying to find a network. His work created one.
The nature of that network is so crucial. Open source communities don't engage out of charity. They engage because the work is legible, it's expensive in terms of hours, and it demands their time and their expertise.
And that's the distinction between chasing potential and demonstrating skill. Most people rely on the social first approach. They introduce themselves, they explain their potential, they ask for a chance, but potential is cheap. I mean, everyone claims to have it. Skill is expensive.
Hmm.
And when skill is presented as an artifact, the code, the dashboard, the process flow, it becomes legible to strangers who will judge it purely on its merit.
And what's really remarkable is how this philosophy, which originated in the highly technical world of software development, it applies universally to basically any profession.
Absolutely. The phrase, which is often attributed to the open source community, is "talk is cheap, show me the code." We have to treat that as a philosophy of credibility, extending far beyond software.
So the code in any field is whatever can't be easily faked.
It's the tangible, inspectable artifact of your craft. For a lawyer, it might be the annotated memo that just cuts through a decade of legal precedent. For a manager, it might be the three-page process flow that reliably reduces error rates by 30%.
So let's synthesize the combined power of these 5 stories. They all point to this deliberate strategy of leading with the artifact, making your skill visible, and then letting the relationships follow the utility.
The final actionable tactics that we can derive from these examples are pretty straightforward, though they're not easy. First, lead with an artifact, not an introduction. When you reach out to someone influential, don't ask for a favor, ask for feedback.
So instead of, can you mentor me?
You say, "What's wrong with this working draft of my new client onboarding process?" That's a far better question. The first one begs for their time. The second one respects their time and leverages their expertise.
And we have to, as you mentioned earlier, make the work legible. That means documenting the messy reality of it, the release notes, the decision logs, the before and after comparisons.
Yes, your process has to reduce the distance to try it. If a stranger can engage with or test or evaluate your work in under 3 minutes, if your skill is immediately visible in the artifact, you multiply the odds of a real interaction. And therefore, you rapidly scale your network without chasing anyone. You create gravity.
It's about building a reputation that is auditable, that's reliable, and is based on results that survive contact with reality. Just like Gutaragi's chip survived that corporate rejection, and Katherine Johnson's calculations survived the pressure of a fatal launch.
The enduring lesson on the power of earned attention is this: don't network for attention pinching. Build something that deserves it. #tag outro. As we bring this deep dive to a close, the core insight for the ambitious professional is really a pivot in focus. The most powerful strategic move you can make is shifting your investment from chasing borrowed trust through extensive but often superficial relationships to generating earned trust through deep, demonstrable skill.
Yeah.
The ambition isn't just to be in the room, it's to become the necessary infrastructure that the room relies on to function, whether that's a proprietary terminal, a verifiable calculation, or simply the person who cuts through the corporate fog.
And what unites all of these incredible success stories, Bloomberg's undeniable data delivery, Seuss' market-compelling Zen architecture, and Katherine Johnson's hand calculations, is that their professional achievements were not only successful, but they were auditable and legible to the entire outside world. They weren't just great ideas. They were reliable, inspectable results that demanded a response. So we leave you with this final thought, something for you to mull over and explore on your own as you plan your next professional move. If your greatest professional achievement, the tool you built, the process you clarified, the result you verified, if it were published anonymously, completely stripped of your name, your job title, and your network, would its utility, its clarity, and its sheer reliability still compel strangers to seek it out, depend on it, and build upon it? What is the code that truly proves your worth in your field?